You never know what your last moments on Earth would be, but if you did, what would be your last words for the world to know? For these folks, the ones who had to lead a life of crime and violence, what brought them to an expected end of the death penalty, definitely had something to say before they died. Hi, my name is Jessa, and let's look at the top 10 darkest last words spoken by evil people. Number 10, John Wayne Gacy. Surprisingly, the reason why he is on number 10 isn't for his crimes, as heinous and disgusting as they were. Gacy had a criminal record that included convictions for physical harm and an attempt of harming young boys in the 1960s. Despite these convictions, he was able to build a relatively successful contracting business and maintaining a facade of normalcy. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy physically violated and killed at least 33 teenage boys and young men. He often lured his victims with the promise of work or money, and once his home, Gacy would use various methods including strangulations or suffocations to kill his victims. Many of Gacy's victims were buried in the crawl space beneath his house. As the number of the victims increased, he began disposing the bodies in the Des Plaines River, and the sheer scale of his crimes and graphic nature of the evidence shocked the law enforcement. Gacy went to trial in 1980 and was convicted of the 33 kills. He was sentenced to death, and the reason he's at number 10 is for his very boring last words, which was "kiss my ass." Number 9, George Bernard Harris. After winning $500 USD on a craps game on Kansas March 11, 1989, George Bernard Harris exchanged his money for 2 machine firearms, then enlisted a second man to hold them for safekeeping. The second man gave the weapons to a third man to hang on to, but when Harris wanted the weapons back later that night, the third man couldn't find them and Harris shot him dead. First degree with the possibility of a death sentence, an unusual statutory created by category of homicide, allowing the most severe punishment for extremely heinous crimes. The essential element of the first degree is cool, unimpassionate, premeditated, sometimes called malice aforethought. In Harris' case, even assuming all the state evidence against him to be true, Harris shot Willoughby suddenly during a quarrel. The inescapable fact compels the conclusion that Harris was not acting with cool premeditation, and his last words were, "Somebody needs to kill my trial attorney." Number 8, Rosendo Rodriguez III. After confessing to killing a 16-year-old in 2004 and dumping her body in a Texas landfill, Rodriguez III was later convicted of killing and dumping a 29-year-old woman in the same manner the following year. Was linked to at least 5 other physical violations. In his final statement, he called for investigations of Powell and medical examiner Natarajan, saying that they had been involved in multiple wrongful convictions. He had also called for a boycott of Texas businesses until capital punishment is ended there. But either way, once he was given the death sentence, it was all wrapped up from there. His last words were, "I have fought the good fight, I have run the good race, Warden, I am ready to join my father." Which seems like a very typical sentiment, especially after wanting to see your father in the afterlife. But bro, what are you talking about? What fight? You killed 2 women and couldn't control yourself, which leads to the one person who would be Rosendo's worst nightmare. Number 7, Eileen Wos. We've covered Eileen Wos on this channel many times before, and how she was a convicted serial killer, as she targeted mainly men as an adult worker. She had up to 7 victims and would target specifically the motorists that she would meet and men that would meet her, as she would act as a hitchhiker. While she was incarcerated at the Florida Department of Corrections and BCI death row for women, she tried to appeal to the US Supreme Court, which, as we know, was later denied. At some point, she dismissed her legal counsel and terminated all pending appeals. Although she had a lot of memorable quotes, her final words were, "I'd just like to say, I'm sailing with the rock and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." She died by lethal injection, which, by the way, June 6th, I was confused a bit why that date. Turns out she died in 2002, and the assumption of June 6, 2006, it being the triple sixes, would result to her return, but turns out it was just a regular Taco Tuesday. Number 6, Wesley Allen Dodd. Wesley Allen Dodd was an American convicted serial killer and physical violator offender. In 1989, he physically harmed and killed 3 young boys in Vancouver, Washington. He was arrested later that year after a failed attempt to abducting a 6-year-old at a movie theater. Dodd wrote detailed accounts of his killings in a diary that was found by police, which was also on him. After pleading guilty to the charges of the deaths, he too also received the death penalty. After refusing an automatic appeal, he was executed by hanging on January 5th, 1993. The first legal hanging in the United States since 1965. His last words, spoken from the 2nd floor of the indoor gallows, were recorded by the media witnesses as, "I was once asked by somebody, I don't remember who, if there was any physical violator offenders that could be stopped. I said no. I was wrong. I was wrong when I said there was no hope, no peace. There is hope, there is peace. I found both in the Lord Jesus Christ. Look to the Lord and you will find peace." Number 5, Kimberly McCarthy. Kimberly McCarthy was an American death row inmate and suspected serial killer who convicted and sentenced to the death of the 1997 death of her neighbor, 71-year-old retired college professor Dorothy Booth, in her Lancaster, Texas home during a robbery. She was a suspect in the death of 2 other elderly Texas women, for which she never actually tried, and after her final federal appeal was denied in July 2012, McCarthy's execution date was set for January 29, 2013. On June 26, 2013, McCarthy was executed by the state of Texas by lethal injection, becoming the 500th person to be executed by the state of Texas by that method. Her last words were, "This is not a loss, this is a win. You know where I'm going home to be with Jesus. Keep the faith, I love you all." Number 4, Ted Bundy. Although he had different types of victims as well as primarily had these traits, the exact number of Bundy's victims is unknown, but the estimate range goes from 30 to over 100. His crimes occurred across several states, including Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. Bundy was apprehended multiple times but managed to escape custody twice. His first escaped occurrence in Aspen, Colorado in 1977, and his second escape took place in December 1977 from a Colorado jail. During these escapes, he committed additional deaths, and in 1979, Bundy was convicted of numerous charges, including these deaths, kidnapping, and burglary. He received death sentences for his crimes, and despite multiple appeals and efforts to delay his execution, Bundy was eventually executed by the electric chair at Florida State Prison. A lot of the people know that it wasn't just Ted who was charming. He wasn't. It was just the fact that he was good at manipulating people by the means of using tactics of helplessness. He confessed to 30 killings before being executed in Florida's electric chair on January 24th, 1989. His last words were, "I'd like to give you my love to my family and friends." Number 3, Albert Fish. Albert Fish, you'll realize that this guy was not only insane and absolutely horrendous, he was also disgusting and horrible. Albert Fish was executed at Sing Sing Prison in New York. The Moon Maniac was known as America's most notorious and disturbed killers. He was an American serial killer, physical violator, harmed minors, and a cannibal who committed at least 3 child deaths from July 1924 to June 1928. He was also known as the Gray Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, and Brooklyn's Vampire and Moon Maniac, and the Boogeyman. However, authorities believe that Fish killed as many as 10 minors and then ate their remains. Fish once boasted that he had minors in every state, and at one time has stated his number of victims were up to 100. However, it is not known whether he was referring to the physical harms or eating people, nor is it known if the statement was truthful. At his trial, the jury concluded that he was insane, but that he should die anyway, and so his last words were, "I don't know why I'm here." Honestly, yeah, why? But when Fish was saying this, he didn't know why he was here. He was actually not referring to just the execution room. He meant why was he on this earth. He generally asked why somebody like him would be created and allowed to live, why his life had been nothing but trauma and harm, given and taken. It wasn't confusion, it was a final wail, a cry for purpose that he was never given, and another disbelief at the abomination that his life was. Number 2, Peter Kürten. A man who was notorious for physically violating and killing about 60 people. He was known to have drunk the blood of at least one of his victims, earned him the nickname the Vampire of Dusseldorf. For his heinous crimes, mostly against minors, he was executed by guillotine on July 2nd, 1931, and before he died, he confessed to nearly 70 other crimes, including physical violations, arsons, and killings. So monstrous was Kürten's actions that the scientists split his head open and dissected his brain, searching for an anatomical abnormality to explain such evil, and they found nothing. Physically, Kürten appeared just to be as ordinary as any other person. Apparently, when they did split his head and mummified it, they actually showcased it at Ripley's, which we won't show, but you can Google if you want. His last words were, "Tell me, after my head has been chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That will be a pleasure to end all pleasures." Right, alright, weirdo. Number 1, Robert Alton Harris. And for the top quote, that, if I'm honest, he had a point. He was an American car thief, burglar, kidnapper, and killer who was executed at San Quentin State Prison in 1992 for the 1978 deaths of 2 teenage boys in San Diego, Robert Alton Harris. His execution was the first in the state of California since 1967, and although his crime isn't as unique and definitely a part of history's unnecessary act of humankind, he was also more noted for his final words. His final words were, "You can be a king or a street sweeper, but everyone dances with the Grim Reaper." His words were actually based on the 1991 film Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, a film sequel to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where the main protagonists die and are found having to gamble with death in the afterlife to get back on Earth. To Robert, maybe he thought like the movie he could cheat his way around death and come back, but I don't think so. But catch you later, Robert Alton Harris. Well, that's all for this list, and as I mentioned before, what would be your last words if you knew it was going to be your last? Mine would be simple. As long as you tried your best, who cares? And being kind and nice isn't a bad thing. Sometimes it's just a person's way of fighting to survive every day. But be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.